An advisor once said to me, he's like, don't fuck up leadership and don't fuck up culture, and everything else will take care of itself. And it really comes down to, like, we have a vision, we have values, we don't violate those values, we pursue the vision, and then we hire for people that are passionate about this, that have the grit, because folks that are entering into the DoD defense ecosystem today, like, there'll be a bit of a shakeout at some point. It's the folks that have the grit and the drive to go and do this that will persevere and will end up changing the system.
Thousands of companies show up to sell their technology to the U.S. Department of Defense each year, but so few will transition from proof of concept to true production across the valley of death. The select few who do, their stories are rarely told. Until now. I'm Noah Scheinbaum, and this is Crossing the Valley.
James Boyd is a veteran, an engineer, and an entrepreneur. He's had an incredible career. After graduating from Stanford in 2005, he immediately joined the U.S. Army, where he served in the 1st Special Forces Group and then the Special Forces Schoolhouse. Then he joined Palantir, a company that was just starting to make a dent in the university, worked there on a variety of projects for 7 years. And then it was time to start his own company. He co-founded Adyton to reduce the amount of time that military personnel spend on administrative and operational tasks. Today, the company is still just getting started, and they have some impressive wins under their belt. Now it's time to hear James's story in his own words. James Boyd, CEO and founder of Adyton. James, thank you for taking the time. Thanks for being here. I'm excited for this conversation.
Noah, thanks for hosting.
Awesome. We've got a lot to cover with you. Your background is truly inspirational in that you have put service at the core of your life, really from the beginning. And I want to start there, James, because as folks will quickly pick up, for an American Special Forces veteran and an American defense tech founder, you have a bit of an accent. So can you tell us a little bit about your own personal story and where you come from and how you ended up here?
Oh, yeah, absolutely too. My wife jokes that she married a Brit and now she's married to an American because my accent has faded. But I was born in California in the States, grew up in the UK, went to school there throughout primary school, secondary school. So I do think that football gets played with your feet and that beer is best served at room temperature. And then came back to the US during the dot-com boom, during 2000, 2001, because I was just passionate about technology. Worked in Silicon Valley and then started at Stanford, studied computer science, September 10th, 2001. And of course, 9/11 was just this pivotal moment for all of us. And that really, it changed the future of my life at that point.
So you were at Stanford, you were on the other side of the country, the planes hit the towers, those are formative but adult years where you're old enough to do something about it, you certainly understand what's going on. What was going through your mind? What was kind of the decision calculus for you at that point?
I mean, this was just like such a frontal assault on freedom, right? This was the idea that you're attacking innocent people, and you're attacking the way of life and what America means to the world. And growing up in the UK, you're very, very close to World War I and World War II. The high school that I went to, I was really fortunate to go to a great school, and there's this wall of students who had died. Like there's a memorial wall, about 800 students. So it's 5 graduating classes of students that died. And this is one of the elite schools. And the underlying thesis was like, hey, just because you were lucky enough to go to a good school doesn't absolve you of the responsibility of defending the values and freedom. And so when I looked at this, I said, I have to be a part of this. There was no way I couldn't not be part of this. And I looked at the UK military, looked at the US military, and the US Army Special Forces were the only people offering this opportunity to try out, roll the dice, bet on yourself a little bit to go be part of defending freedom. And I said, well, hey, I'm going to go and do this, roll the dice, went through Special Forces training, went down to a team in the southern Philippines, spent 3 years going after bin Laden's finance networks. And it was this kind of crazy time that we were training guys during the day and putting them out of helicopters at night, and I'm using these Army intelligence systems that didn't talk to each other, and I'm sitting there in the jungle hand-jamming CGI and SQL scripts, writing code to try and glue together intelligence data sets so that I can vet the targets that we're going after. And some guys said, hey, you should check out Palantir. And that's kind of what then launched me into defense tech in the very early days. So it was like solving the problems that I experienced as a soldier, then going into Palantir and saying, hey, like this is an opportunity to do this at scale.
It's a very interesting path of you were probably, one of the first people really doing the kind of the when Palantir still talked about big data analytics before we're now AI everything, but doing that in the inside, seeing the platform kind of directly impact your day-to-day operations, and then making the decision to go forward with it. I'm really curious at that point, what was the Stanford to military pipeline like at that time?
Super robust. Tons and tons of folks would. No, I'm kidding. Right? Like there was like an Army ROTC program through an adjacent college. But if you wanted to go enlist, there were not many people that did that. And this kind of amazing thing happened. So when I got to what was then Fort Benning in Georgia, as an E4, I was like, what is going on? I've never been to the south of the United States before. We had like catfish and grits for breakfast. I've never eaten catfish and grits before in my whole life. I grew up with fish and chips in England, right?
Yeah.
And I met my co-founder there, JJ, he'd grown up in Tennessee. He went to Cornell, and same experience for him. And there was this kind of generational grouping. It's like a selection bias that when we went to boot camp, 25% of the kids in our platoon had been to college. And they all joined up. It was the first class, 2005. If you started college September 2001, this was when you went to boot camp. And these were folks that they went to like Duke, UT Austin, amazing schools. And they said, I just have to go and be a part of this. And that was a cohort that I think carried us through, some pretty challenging training at times. And to have a group of peers that were just so focused on the values and the mission, that's what carried us all through that. But it was a culture shock. Like, this wasn't Palo Alto. This was not Palm Drive. This was Victory Drive in Columbus, Georgia.
And they served the beer cold, God forbid, huh? That must have been.
I don't actually recall there being any beer in Columbus, Georgia.
I bet. I just want to underscore, I think and folks who are listening, I think can appreciate this, especially, today we face global threats, massive threats. The world is a dangerous place. The ability to come out of a place like a Stanford and resist the pull. Now, 2005, dot-com bubble, all of that, the background's a little different, but the pressure's probably largely the same of, hey, you're coming out of this elite institution, you've spent all this money on tuition, the expectation is you're going to go on, do big things, make a lot of money, what have you. To resist that pull and not just join the military, but go right out, direct commission or direct tryouts for special forces, that's no easy task, right? And when you talk about contrarian bets on founders who maybe think differently, that's one of, I think, I could imagine, for family, that's one of the clearest signals of someone who's able to resist the current thing, who's able to resist that peer pressure. I'm curious, is that something that, did you kind of have that forged in you from childhood, or is that something you've always been very good at, or how were you able to resist the pressure to go join, fill in the blank big name company at that point?
Man, that was a thing, right? Like, everyone's going to management consulting, to investment banking at the time. The tech scene wasn't quite as big in 2005. And I remember a lot of folks said, hey, don't join the military. You will end up behind your peers. You will be behind in your career path. And the thing that struck me is, first of all, like, if you've done something unique and you combine something else unique, then what you have is this intersection in the Venn diagram. And so at the time, I remember thinking, hey, there's probably not a lot of kids that did Stanford and have some computer science and also served in Army Special Operations or also served in the military. And so you sort of neck down that Venn diagram. Of course, as you get more and more specialized, you get some kind of compounding returns. Like Naval Ravikant talks a lot about this stuff. You get these very, very niche skills. And the other thing I thought about was, hey, I want to go and see the way the world works. And so the violent kind of force inside was, there were very, very smart people saying, I'm going to go and write policy for this. Well, and I thought, well, I'm not going to go and write policy. I'm going to go and see how the world works before I start thinking about policy, before I think about how you change it. And so I think the thing that I picked up in the Army was really, it was a ton of systems thinking, because you get thrown into these environments. You see the way human terrain impacts things, how geographical terrain, how economic conditions interact things. And then you start recognizing you got these very, very, people talk about wicked problems in the world. And you talk about insurgency, those are wicked problems. And you talk about destabilizing influences from China locally, and there's this it is very, very complex, because you have the social layer, the economic layer, the religious layer, the political power layer, you have the control and force and violence that intersect across these things. It's really, really hard to change it. And I think got the privilege in the Army Special Forces to be able to go and interact across these different layers and domains, and you sort of like pull on a thread over here and it would make a change happen over here. And we were able to do things to disrupt terrorists, and I'm really proud to say it stopped a terrorist attack from taking place in the capital city. I mean, not me only, like, it was a huge team effort, but I really saw that. I was like, hey, like, this is amazing. What is a more levered way of doing this? How do we scale this out? How do we take everyday folks in the Army and make them more effective and make them more powerful? And because you've got this huge human capital and human talent base there, and if you can make them more effective when they're doing things, well, you can magnify their impact in the world.
And so was that I think it's a great laydown of some of the observations from that perch and that kind of team culture. Obviously General McChrystal's team of teams, right, talking about this kind of layered approach to these fusion cells and just bringing together those different pieces of information that existed previously in silos, weren't getting to the point of impact. Sounds like you had some similar experiences there. Talk to us about that decision to leave the military and to join what was then still very much a startup in the form of Palantir that you saw as a transformational technology.
I don't want to downplay the role that luck has in everything. I loved my team. I loved what we were doing. I tried to extend. On my last deployment, I was like, I want to stay. Let me stay another 6 months, because I really believed in what we were doing. And I'd experienced these frustrations, these friction points with technology. And the Army did not let me stay deployed, which is probably for the better thing for my marriage. And I was home on leave, and I was chatting with a friend, and he said, hey, Doug Philippone and I are running the defense business at Palantir. I'm hearing your stories and you writing code. You got to come and work here. And I remember interviewing at Palantir and saying, hey, the only thing I care about is, we got to go and get this product deployed across all special operations. This is my mission at Palantir, is to make sure everyone has this. Because you think about, technology is a medium of power, right? In the same way that electrical cables are a medium of conducting electricity, technology is a medium of power. And what I saw is hey, if you can put a product in somebody's hands that makes them more effective at finding IEDs or finding in green on blue threats or identifying ISIS safe havens, right? You can make that person faster, more effective. You can make the entire organization, because it's really a living being, more effective in this. And so obviously then from Palantir, it was hey, well, how can we scale this even further? Not just building products, but building a company that lets other people come and build these kinds of products that solve these kinds of problems that I think really need to be tackled.
Yeah, what's immediately apparent to me, James, is you have one of the most high agency approaches to all of this of anyone I've met, in the sense of you went right, hey, how do I get right into, I got to get into the fight, but not just anywhere. I want to be in special forces from day one. And then from there, it's, hey, what's the highest leverage thing I can do to support this mission, even if it's not in, if I'm not going to be deployed in some other form. And you joined arguably the highest agency company of the last 2 decades in terms of Palantir being just this crucible of founder talent, throwing folks into this entrepreneurial crucible. We'll come back maybe to lessons from Palantir later, but I am curious just what it was like joining the company at that stage and kind of where you started. Do you have a job title? What was your kind of Palantir early story?
It was so fun. I remember day one, they gave you a laptop with an extended battery and a BlackBerry and a VPN and a hotspot, and they're you're connected all the time. There were 3,000 emails in my inbox. And when we did our weekly BD meeting, there were 8 of us that sat around the table. And very early on, I remember there were 3 folks on the team and 2 of them left because this stuff is hard. This stuff is really, really hard. And what's challenging is because everyone's so passionate and they all want to see it succeed. And so you actually have to harness that kind of emotion, the same kind of emotion you see on a sports field, to create the drive and willingness to persevere against. The DoD was not an easy customer to work with for a long time. And it's made huge strides in the last few years especially, but it's still not an easy customer to work with. And I think probably 6 months in, the other 2 folks had quit and they're like, James, you're running things with special operations now. I'm like, okay, we got to go and do this. And it was fun. It was amazing to join an organization that connects you with your mission and your purpose that you care deeply about. And that's the thing I feel so fortunate about, that for a lot of vets that are transitioning, they're trying to find their own way. And I got lucky that I landed in an organization that would help channel that inner kind of drive. And that's not a thing that everyone gets. So yeah, huge appreciation for Palantir and everyone there that helped me build Adyton today.
Yeah, we see this quite often, especially through work with defense tech jobs. And a lot of veterans who come out, I think, and they say, I don't want to be defined solely as the military person, as the defense person. I got to go into industry and I'm going to go work at name your big company, conglomerate, or what have you here. And then you see it all the time. It's that I miss the mission. I want to be a part of a team, doing important work at the core of something that reflects the values that I hold dear. And you see a lot of folks kind of coming back. I think that's part of the surge, frankly, of defense tech in the last few years, is you have people who recognize the world's a dangerous place. We can't afford to be kind of just off, or we don't want to be off doing other things when the mission is here, even if it means you're not wearing the uniform. So finding ways to contribute, however that may manifest. I think that's probably a good point to maybe transition a bit to talk about Adyton, which, we're about 10, 15 minutes into this interview, and we've barely talked about the company that you founded, James. And so let's pick up the story from, you mentioned, and this shouldn't be lost on folks, you met your co-founder in the earliest days of training for special forces, right? You're just showing up to boot camp. And then you had this period of service there, this time at Palantir. When did you first have the idea to start a company?
So when I was in Iraq in 2015 and 16, I was leading our team there at Palantir, and we built out this really, really powerful mission planning environment. It's called Gaia, and it was awesome. We worked really closely with the Navy SEALs designing this thing. I remember doing the first desk sides, and the maps, the tiles didn't load on the map. It was like very painful. I'm like, trust me, this is going to be great. And we built it out, and it became a very, very rich product. And I remember we had like satellite imagery and drone strikes and SIGINT hits and all that sort of stuff. And it's amazing. And the commander of the SEALs said, hey, James, this is amazing, but which Iraqi units actually have pickup trucks that work and can drive to Mosul? Who's actually got spare firing pins for the machine guns? Who's got trained and qualified medics? And the reality is that most of the day-to-day in the military and national security and law enforcement and a lot of organizations is very much analog. It's green notebooks, it's clipboards, it's whiteboards, it's walkie-talkies. And so as a technologist, you see this, you're like, hey, like we have a last mile problem here, which is that the people that actually do the work, that see the things, that sense stuff, that are the projection of land military power, they're disconnected from the enterprise in a digital way. And I saw this with the NATO allies there. We draw a line across the different sectors. And like, Italians, you're going to go here, and Americans, you're going to go here, and French, you're going to go here, and nobody cross the line because you might blow each other up by accident, right? And that's a pretty crude way of doing things. And so when it came to answer this data question from the commander of the SEALs, I went out to the team houses in like Fallujah and Taji and Al-Assad, and I see the SEALs there. And they're training the Iraqi forces, and they've all got smartphones out. I'm like, hey, that's amazing. What are they doing on their smartphones? I'm a nerd. I want to go and see the smartphone. And I look over their shoulder, and, there's Iraqi guys like doing ready up drills and CQB drills and like shooting and stuff like that. And the SEALs are tapping away on their phones. And they're day trading biotech stocks on Robinhood, YOLOing on call options, right? Because like, hey, risk management decisions, why would I not do that, right? Like it's like peak career risk and like peak economic risk. And then when it comes time to actually document the Iraqi force readiness, it's like green notebook time. It comes out of the cargo pocket and you get some chicken scratch that goes down. And then at the end of the day, they go and they hand jam some of that information into a computer. And so the thing I saw was like, hold on, time out. If we have LTE connections and we can do secure banking transactions, why the heck can't we actually do more business process in the Department of Defense? And there's this fundamental thing here of like, okay, well, if you can solve for device security and you can solve for network security and you can solve for connectivity and compliance stuff, you unlock this world of the possible. And so if you think about trying to do any kind of banking application today, the mobile phone is probably the default interface that you use for that. It's probably not, let me fire up the computer and do this. When you got to go move some money around or something, or you got to go deal with insurance. Like we use USAA. It's a very, very frictionless experience. And so we said, hey, look, if we can solve this, what do you get? You get data directly from the edge fed back to the enterprise. You also get information and insights from the enterprise fed directly to folks at the edge, and you enable collaboration and communication at the edge. So what does that mean? That means that if you were the soldier or the Marine or the sailor who's training somebody at the field, you're documenting their readiness. You're observing equipment malfunctions. You're generating a real-time data feed from this. It goes back to the enterprise. And then when things like threats occur and stuff like that, that's going straight back down to the end user. Like I remember this totally absurd situation. We were in Baghdad, and ISIS was about 5 clicks away over in Abu Ghraib, and we would get imminent threat warnings periodically. And there were some NATO partners there. And you know the way the DoD likes to do things, they put a different colored computer on your desk to do different things. So it's like I got a green computer to do some unclass and some red computer to do some US classified and some yellow computer and some pink computer and some gray computer and some purple computer, and like you have different computers.
The whole rainbow of computer, yeah.
Whole rainbow, right? And I remember there was an imminent threat warning, and of course everyone gets alerted in the operations center. And then the next morning, I won't name names, but there was another NATO country, and they rolled in, and they're kind of walking into the office with their coffee cup, and then they go and they fire up access to the pink computer, because that was the only computer that you could communicate with this other country on. But they obviously didn't have that computer in their office. So they came into the operations center, fire up the pink computer, check their email, and it's like, hey, imminent threat warning in the next 60 minutes. And the guy throws up his hands. He's like, come on, man. Like, you couldn't have picked up the phone and called us. And so this is just a symptom of this last mile connectivity challenge. So that's why we started Adyton, was to build a first-class digital operations suite for the military, for national security, that enables secure, automated, frictionless business process to take place across US and our allied forces at the edge. This is not the folks that are in the air conditioning. These are the folks that are outside of the air conditioning.
That's an awesome kind of laydown of what Adyton is. And I think, to talk a little bit about the scale that you guys are at today, James, you're in use across Army, Navy, and Air Force, 7 special forces groups, 38 of 59 Army Brigade combat teams.
39 now.
39 of 59. Right. So we're burning down the 20 that are remaining. You're across most of the COCOMs, I think CENTCOM, EUCOM, NORTHCOM, INDOPACOM, and SOUTHCOM. And you're growing really fast, right? It sounds like, I think, active units with the Adyton operations kit deployed, 500% growth in the last year over 2024. This has got to feel pretty incredible to you. We're looking forward to digging into what's behind those numbers. But situate us today, like, where is the company relative to your ambition, to what you all set out to do, your aspiration for how you were going to change the scale of military operations? Are you on, is this the first quarter where we're still just kind of like proving out the value to everybody?
Oh, man, this is the opening minutes of the game. If I understand the way quarters work, this is the opening minutes of the game, right? Like, we've just had kickoff at this point and our first down or something like that, or second down. The thing we set out to do that was different was going direct to the end user and direct to the warfighter. And that was a lesson I learned at Palantir. It's like, you have to solve for pain, you have to seek pain. And so for us, we didn't start by saying, hey, we're going to go to the program offices. We didn't start by saying we're going to go to the service secretaries, the resource sponsors, go to HASC or anything like that. We're going to go straight to the end user, the E3s, the E4s, the E5s that are doing the job on a daily basis. And thought, hey, there's this giant principal agent problem in the Department of Defense, right? The buyer and the user are not the same people. And I think there's huge strides being made with the software acquisition pathway and things like that to try and shrink that gap. And so we said, hey, like, we're going to go to the end user and we're going to solve problems for them. And we're going to show that you can build a company and build products in defense by solving directly for the end user. And that's why we have such strong responses from end users for our products. Like, when we showed logistics and log-e to users, like, it's kind of absurd situation. So we have one of the products in our suite automates digital asset book maintenance. So traditionally, you have folks that are keeping track of their property. They print out binders. You have this legacy enterprise resource system, prints out hundreds of pages of text, and then red pen and green pen and highlighting. And then to split your books, you're manually typing things into different spreadsheets and different PDFs, and you're printing things out and signing them. It's hugely time consuming. And we turn that into a complete digital interaction backed by cryptography, right? So we can take an ingest from the enterprise system, you can digitally split it and assign it to different people, you can do audits periodically, you enrich and attach pictures and notes and tags and structure, so you can say, hey, show me every piece of equipment across all these different units that soldiers say, we do not need this thing, please get this off of our books. This is a waste of our time and money owning this thing. Or where the enterprise system says, hey, we know that this machine gun is assigned to this unit, we can say, well, that machine gun is assigned to that soldier in that squad, in that platoon, in that unit, in this location. It's currently deployed. This is how many times it's been deployed. It's missing 2 of its spare barrels, and it's only got 1 T&E left. So if it loses one traversing and elevation element, it's like an adapter for a tripod. You lose one of those things, then this gun is not going to be mission capable, but they also have a deployment coming up, and this other unit has some spares, so you can cross-load the spares over there. And so when we showed it to soldiers, like, going from an analog, like a paperwork process, to what we call a data work process, we're in a chapel in an army base, because that's where they like to do gatherings. It's like a conference facility in a chapel, place of God. And we're doing the demo, and the guy says, I will try not to swear on this interview. But the guy says, F my life out loud.
You
right?
could swear on the interview. I don't know if a soldier was trying not to swear.
I'm quoting the soldier. Soldier just says out loud in the church, fuck my life, because he saw how much time he could have saved over his career using our product. And of course, the flip side of that is that you get data on the backside of this. And so the thing that we said was different. It's like, hey, we're going to go and solve problems for the end users, make them faster, more efficient, help them with their readiness, and generate a data asset that provides decision advantage for the enterprise. Because a lot of what I saw at Palantir back to Iraq was, hey, there's these data gaps. Because if you're a decision maker at the enterprise or in a COCOM or something like that, and you're trying to plan allocation of your forces or your people or manage investments across programs and things like that, you're kind of looking at a soda straw if all you're looking through a soda straw if all you're looking at is your existing ERPs. There is this whole world of ground truth that doesn't actually get captured in a digital mechanism. And, Sun Tzu has this saying of, know the enemy, you'll win the battle, know yourself, you'll win the war. That's what it comes down to. Like, you actually have to understand the ground truth that surrounds all of your different units across these brigades, Army Special Forces units. Like, we're very excited about our aircraft carrier rollout taking place right now. It's that ground truth. And we surface that to the enterprise, and we do that by saving time for the warfighter.
I love the visceral reaction. Like, you can picture that scene in your mind, which is that golden moment, right? You need to have somebody who says, okay, now that this exists, I cannot live without it. I'm curious, James, to roll it back, what we do on this show, we like to unpack the how behind some of this. And so when you think about, getting into those first conversations on those bases, the development of the product versus the customer relationships, I'm kind of curious how you parallel pathed or sequenced that. Was this something where you and your co-founder knew exactly what you wanted to build on day one, and it was like, hey, let's get that MVP and then go meet someone? Or were you working with design partners from day one? There's lots of different ways to skin that cat. I'm curious how you all approached it.
Into the sausage factory, this is... because we were taking a relatively unique approach of going bottoms up, direct through the end user to do this, I would say that the kind of the programmatic infrastructure was not well set up for this. And so we kind of it was a little bit of hooking and jabbing, if I'm honest. Like, we took a phase 1 with the Air Force that got us access to some more units that did a phase 2. And we were just seeing, like, when we went to do our first cyber certification, you had to fill out a form, and it said, is this a server application or a desktop application? I'm like, there's no drop down that says, it runs on a mobile device, GFE or BYOD, right? There's no drop down for that.
Pre-COVID, 2018, right? This
totally.
Was before.
Well, it's like we did our seed round like end of 2019, so we started building the company like early 2020, and of course that was an amazing time to try and build a company. Yeah. Flip side is, like, because we ended up with a lot of remote folks, we have this huge empathy for the distributed workforce. But yeah, like we knew that you needed to have cyber compliance out of the gate, right? And so we architected our entire tech stack to the CNSSI 1253 requirements for national security systems. So I had done all of our ATOs, our DIACAPs, and RMFs over at Palantir. Like, the question is, like, are we really trying to solve value, or am I just trying to recoup the gray hairs that I've accrued on my head from dealing with the J62? But we knew that you had to have the cyber compliance. We knew you had to have the contracting pathways for this. And so if you think of the adoption curve of technology, right, you've got a couple of very early adopters, and then you've got this giant schism, right, across this, where you've got ATOs, contract vehicles, you've got the legal that has to sign off on all these things. And so we kind of knew we had to go and collect these things. So we worked with the Air Force. We did like TAC-5. We got a cyber certification to field into Cloud 1. They certified our stack at like IL4. We had some Army units push forward a DISA approval. We got approved by DISA on this. We had some Navy units. I don't want to diminish the tremendous effort across the ground game with the units to actually push this up and generate wins at the unit level and champions and these 04s and 05s that were pushing this to the point that we get a basic ordering agreement with the Navy through NAVAIR. And then it's like, hold on, now you've got this contracting approval, and we got listed in the Army chest catalog, and you got the cyber approvals and things like that. And I'm like, sweet, we're going to go and flip on Facebook ads, and we're going to go and scoop some people up with this. And so this, I would say, like, the path to do this, we had to kind of piecemeal and bolt together these different things, because there's not like one streamlined path. It's like we did some SIBRs, we did some vendor demonstration agreements, we did some TACFI, we did some GPC swipes. We subbed to the phone company in one case for a unit that has been paying for our software with their own O&M dollars for the past 3 years and like expands every single year. So it was by hook and by crook that we got to this thing that gives you that momentum, but we wanted to show that it could be done bottoms up.
I just want to pause and reflect back for listeners. If you got lost at all in the acronym soup or gumbo that James just laid out for us, just recognize what that was we took a kitchen sink of acquisition approaches to get our product in the hands of people who wanted it and needing it. So we talked about SBIR, the Small Business Innovation Research, the phase 1 kind of discovery hunting license, the phase 2 proof of concept. We talked about the tactical funding increase, the TACFI program, the fluency that you just rattled off, kind of authorization to operate, or kind of the different IT certifications required to be able to put software on devices and put software on networks, is a native fluency that you get from being on both sides of it, being in the fight and doing this in uniform, and also at a place like Palantir, having learned the hard lessons of how to actually get the software into production. Today, there are some other options where you see a lot of companies coming up and say, oh, we're going to use a Second Front or a Palantir Fed Start, or we're going to go through some of these other channels that allow us to kind of like get that ATO or fulfill that risk mitigation framework, that RMF in a box. Just do it really easily and substitute money for time, which in many cases is actually a really good trade. But the native fluency and understanding that James just laid out is, I think, a very clear example of what certainly was, and I think you could argue still is, required of the appreciation for navigating the bureaucracy to actually, it's the reason why the best product doesn't always win. It's you need more than just the best product. You need that understanding of a system. And so that was kind of a rapid fire masterclass in navigating the bureaucratic jujitsu. So James, I just wanted to reflect back to you, because if you're not going to say it, I've got to say it on your behalf. That's an exceedingly deep level of mastery of that subject matter. So thanks for running through it.
I appreciate that. And I would definitely say, if you're going to build a web application or something like that, goes to FedStart, go to Second Front, do something there. Use as much leverage as possible. And I think the department's made huge strides with the continuous ATO effort to really lower the barriers to entry and bring more new participants into the defense ecosystem. The area we've still found challenging is that there's not a lot of these off-the-shelf programs that will let you do it on a BYOD device. And that was the thing that we needed to solve, because if you want to solve for connecting average sailors, soldiers, Marines, airmen to the rest of the enterprise, in general, they're using their own personal devices. Like we see that across the Navy all day long. It's very limited penetration of government furnished equipment.
Yep, and the bring your own device or BYOD program is not something that really scaled before the COVID era. It's a recent kind of vestige of that operational reality and the change that was foisted upon folks. So I think it's adapting to that and being able to kind of make use of it, super important. You know, James, I want to talk about maybe a specific recent deal. You all had some news recently. This multi-year deal with U.S. Naval Aviation to deploy the AOK to thousands of sailors across multiple aircraft carriers, the Stennis being perhaps one of the more well-known. First of all, congratulations. I can only imagine what it took to get there. And I'm excited to unpack that with you. I want to hear about, how did you all go after that particular target? What did it take to close that big win?
You got the Navy to thank for that one. We had started doing very, very early testing with some Army Reserve units. This is sort of mid-COVID era. You know, this was when the existing business process for personnel accountability, orders dissemination, drill coordination just broke. Because the whole military was used to lining people up and counting them and issuing them instructions and asking questions. And somewhere there's a clipboard and a crusty old sergeant involved, right? And we had said, hey, look, like trying to get folks to use test flight and these kind of software testing frameworks, Firebase app distribution, just isn't kind of cutting it. There's too much friction to get folks into it. And so we put it on the App Store. And then it was probably like September 2020, we had the executive officer for a ship that was in the Persian Gulf email us on a Saturday and say, hey, my crew is pulling into port. The captain said, we need something to control our people. Can you help us? I'm like, wait, you found us through the App Store? That's how this happened? And then the next morning, it was like Sunday morning, we jumped on a Zoom call with the senior chief of the ship and the XO. We gave them a demo and they said, sweet, this solves my problem.
The App Store, meaning we're talking about the Apple App Store or like Google Play?
Yeah. The Apple App Store. They typed in this word and somehow the search engine optimization pointed towards our application. We got that one right. So we onboarded the entire crew remotely on the Monday after that. So we onboarded a couple hundred sailors. They had them in hotels in the Middle East, and they're managing everything from daily automated health checks for COVID, who's sick, who's got a fever and all that sort of stuff, automated roll-ups going to the ship's dock.
Was everybody paying for it individually on their own device?
We did a vendor demonstration agreement. No, we don't want sailors.
Yeah.
Every soldier asks us if they can buy our product. They just say like, hey, can I pay for this myself? I'm like, no, this is government software. This is not for you to buy yourself. And so they onboarded the crew. They started using this for like power on activities. They used it to coordinate the movement of 300 people. They do a crew swap back to Norfolk, Virginia. And so they're managing, it's a giant cat herding exercise. And kind of this amazing thing happened when they got back. The captain of the ship said, hey, look, I'm supposed to put you all in quarantine. But you've been gone 6 months, you're going to be home for 6 months, and then you're going to be gone for another 6 months. But I have a means of interacting with you, with checking in on you, and getting daily accountability in an automated way. So I'm going to use software to do that. I'm going to send you home to your families. You're going to spend 2 weeks with your families instead. So I'm going to give you an extra 2 weeks with your families. Wow. And then they started automating the daily stand-up process, the daily morning accountability, which meant that leaders were then spending more time on things like, hey, training and mentoring, as opposed to just, you got to go pay your charge card, you got to go to hearing, you got to go to dental, all this kind of administrative noise. And so they started getting sailors more sleep. So the yeoman in the unit was like, hey, our sailors love this. They installed the application. They don't even just use the SMS functionality because they get an extra 2 hours sleep every day. And then, the PCS cycle works. So this is when sailors get reassigned to different units, and then they spread to different units, and they spread to different units. It spread out to San Diego, which is right next to the 3-star, the Air Boss. We had a unit use it out there. And then they had things like some hurricanes and tragically some active shooters and some bomb threats, things like that. And an ops kit, it's 16 to 20x faster than every incumbent mechanism. And so then the Air Boss saw it's like, hey, this is getting my attention. We rolled it out on the Stennis, and then now we started, like last week, there was another carrier that said, hey, can we roll out on the crew today? And so Liz, our customer success manager, onboarded the first 400 people that hour, and then they're onboarding the rest over the rest of the month, and we're doing another aircraft carrier later this month. And it's like, honestly, it was pure ground game. It is word of mouth spread from service members that took that up to the 3-star level.
That's incredible. And I think that is the kind of lasting change, right? You hear so many of these stories of, the program office, and you said it. Program office sent us the latest, what, and we're supposed to use it, but it doesn't work, and so we're not going to use it. And the company is fat, dumb, and happy because they've got a big fat contract and they're good for 5 years. And the soldier, the Marine, the warfighter, the aviator is looking at this thing like, you got to be kidding me, right? And in this case, you've just totally flipped that on its head, where you've got that demanding kind of pull of, we've got to have this thing. It's saving me, the individual sailor. It is saving me 2 hours of sleep, and that's incredible. The question I have for you now is, where are you in the process of saying, hey, okay, we've done this bottom up. Now it's time for some top down, at the service level or at the DoD wide level, to say, this needs to be a program for the entirety of the military. You have that. It seems like you have those evangelists across the force. So where's that campaign at?
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of the phase 2 of this. So that's our next kind of quest, is where we've taken, in particular, it's not just like, it's tens of thousands of hours of time savings for these units, and like measurable impact. Like the Navy units that use this have the highest deox rate inside the entire Navy. We've had ships that deploy more quickly because of that. And in the Army, we're tracking now about 250,000 different end items with that different level of like higher resolution data, higher fidelity data. And so now we've got all this impact. We're saying, great, where do we land this programmatically? Where do we connect with the right decision makers? And I think the amazing thing is, you've got folks at the top that are now saying, it is an imperative that we do things differently. It is an imperative that we change the perception of risk programmatically, right? Like risk is borne by the warfighter. That's the person that gets in the helicopter. That's the person taking risk, right? Like the person that is processing the paperwork, we put them in a place where they feel they need to be taking career risk to do things, but that's actually not the real risk we're trying to mitigate around. And so I think the quest for us at this stage is finding the right kind of horizontal mashup across this, because like we integrate really, really gracefully with other systems. Now that could be Office 365, where you have systems like Flank Speed or A365 in the Army, where you can take data from OpsKit, and we have troops already doing this today, and they're pushing it manually to 365. I'm like, hey, let's just go do an integration there, and let's push this automatically, and let's save even more time, feed more data back to the enterprise. Or with other partners as well, where you're looking at data analytics platforms and things like that. And so you might just be a pure data consumer as opposed to a process consumer in that way. So that's the next quest for us, is finding the right program offices to go and plug this into. And I think it's an exciting opportunity to really paint an example for the institution of how things can happen differently. When you have the warfighters actually say, hey, this is a thing that saves time, makes us more effective, makes us more ready. Because the time we save on paperwork is time that we can spend on training. It's time that we can use to move the needle on readiness. And then now we've got, I think in the current administration, there are some very forward-leaning folks that are really, really trying to make a shift. And I think they're setting the conditions that allow folks that have known that they needed to make a change to do that now. It's like there's a greater tolerance for innovation than there used to be. I'd say it's welcome, in fact.
I think you're absolutely right. It's not just a tolerance; it's a recognition that if we keep doing things the same way, we will lose. It's starting to the imperative is starting to be there of, hey, that actually the risk is in continuing to prepare and train and equip ourselves the same way as we have for the last 20 years. It's probably not well suited. We're losing in those simulations against some of these adversaries. So yeah, I think it's a great point. James, as we transition here to this kind of this next segment, I'm very curious about you have so much energy behind this. Paint a picture for us of when Adyton is, you're still in the opening minutes. What does it look like as this company grows and matures? Like, what's the world that our warfighters should be living in? What is big DoD with Adyton? What does that look like?
This is like my own personal product vision that stems from this, right? This is like the vision for the world is that, it starts with the warfighter, with that soldier, the sailor, the M, and the Marine. They are, they're the best of America that's come forward to defend freedom and sign up to protect their country, protect the values, to defend the Constitution. And you see the same thing in other countries as well. Like, goodness, in Eastern Europe, like the momentum to help bolster defense, which is much needed in Europe, I think is, that's human talent and that's human values. So when they show up to work and they interact with their organization, there is a seamless, frictionless interface that runs on their personal device, because that's the thing they're carrying around with them. They're not carrying the laptop. They are interacting with a smartphone because their hands are holding wrenches or rifles, or they're doing things. And so they have this frictionless, holistic, integrated interaction, whether it's across their maintenance tasks or their supply tasks or their personnel tasks or their training tasks or coordinating a range. And there's this seamless flow of data across to the enterprise as well. And you have agentic interfaces that are then providing staff augmentation through AI agents that are interacting across a schemaed and semantic layer, where it's not just I'm manipulating rows and records in a tracker, but I'm changing objects that have meaning. Like, this is a piece of equipment. This is not a row. This is a serial number, not a column. And they're able to interact with that, and the data flows seamlessly. And then we have this aggregated data stream that feeds up to the enterprise decision engines, so that when a soldier marks that, hey, my batteries have gone down on my guidance system unit over here in this theater, we're not going to be able to deplete munitions as quickly as possible. The dynamic supply chain processes can then reallocate munitions elsewhere to build up a stockpile whilst this system's down, and instead reallocate spare parts to that, right? So it's not just like you save the time for the warfighter, you give them an enabled and empowered and high agency experience on a day-to-day basis, but you enable that for the enterprise and the institution as well. And then when they're working with their allies, Australia flies C-17s, America flies C-17s. I think that an Australian mechanic ought to be able to work on an American C-17, or at least exchange spare parts and things like that. And how you enable a fluid, seamless interaction, because we know that if you've got, Sarah, who is the crew chief from the C-17 in the United States, and you got Mick, who is the crew chief from the C-17 in Australia, and they're interacting with one another, it's going to be it's an edge environment that they're doing that. And they're not carrying laptops around, they're carrying smartphones. And then this builds up this holistic data picture, and it's this fabric of interoperability. And that gives these humans that care about what they're doing agency, and it gives the organizations effectiveness.
I'm struck with this reflection we've been talking about a little bit recently of the future of warfare. Despite that, yes, there's lots of new technology. Yes, we have autonomy. The future of warfare is still human. There's still people operating, making political decisions about how to employ the use of force. And there's people behind those systems determining how and where they stitch together to accomplish that, the goals that our political leadership put out. And so it strikes me as incredibly kind of empathetic and generous or just the right thing to do to be able to give the people that we entrust with this responsibility the best tools possible to accomplish their mission.
And I think this comes down also to the velocity of warfare is changing too, right? We have to have hypersonics. We have to have autonomous swarms that go after these things. We have to have humans in the loop as well. And what you can't do is have humans running in first gear while the machines are running in 10th gear, right? That's the bit where it breaks down. And so you need to be able to bring the humans up to digital speed.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. When you reflect back, James, you've had some incredible experiences, at every stage of life, but specifically, your time in the Special Forces, your time in the military, and then your time at Palantir. I'm curious if there's one or two lessons that you take from each of those experiences that inform how you build, we've talked about the product, we talked about the mission, but how you actually build a company, a group of people to go after these targets. How do those, are there one or two things that you've learned from each of those experiences that inform how you're building Adyton?
Yeah, I think in the Army, it was very much systems thinking that we learned. And because you look at this system and this terrain, it's like we would deploy as a team of 12 men. Yeah. And you got your little piece of the battle space. And how can 12 men change an environment? And you tug on this little thread over here, and you spread a rumor over here, and then all of a sudden a bad guy gets run out of their safe haven over here. And that person can no longer build IEDs. And you've changed the security posture for an area. And so this was the idea of hey, if you understand the way the system works together, you can make a very small change, like a butterfly can flap its wings, and then you have a dramatic impact somewhere else. And so I guess that taught us the role of leverage. If you can actually understand the way the system works, you get leverage from that. And then at Palantir, seeing this acute focus on solving for pain. And you have to solve hard problems because there's value encoded in those hard problems. Those hard problems exist for a reason. And if you can solve the hard problem, then there's value that comes from that. And that could be value to the world. It could be economic value that comes, for share price and shareholders and things like that. But you got to go and capture that little piece of value. And then at Adyton, we very much focused on how can we eliminate and reduce friction. And you kind of combine these things together. You know where to pull. You know the things that you can pull on that are actually valuable to solve. And if you can do it more and more efficiently, you generate these compounding effects across this. And I think when it comes to building a business, it's very much like we have to play smarter, not harder in all of this, because we're trying to do things differently. And I think the other part is we look at values and we look at teamwork. And really, an advisor once said to me, is don't fuck up leadership and don't fuck up culture, and everything else will take care of itself. And it really comes down to we have a vision, we have values, we don't violate those values, we pursue the vision, and then we hire for people that are passionate about this, that have the grit, because folks that are entering into the DoD defense ecosystem today, there'll be a bit of a shakeout at some point. It's the folks that have the grit and the drive to go and do this that will persevere and will end up changing the system.
If folks are inspired by the mission that you've laid out today, which I think it's hard not to be, and they're curious to follow along, to potentially get involved, maybe to join the team, where should they go?
Yeah, go hit me up on LinkedIn. Easiest way to get in touch with me. If you are interested in being part of this and you got defense experience, you don't have defense experience, hit me up. We are hiring. And if you are somebody in government and just want to hear about what folks have done We will share the stories. A lot of times we can share the stories that sometimes folks who wear the uniform aren't so comfortable sharing. We'll share the stories. We'll share what we've learned. We just want to help make the system better. And I think that if we all invest in that, then that pays off for everyone in terms of our security and our freedom and the experience for the warfighter.
James Boyd, you have had an incredible career of service, and you're just getting started. We're grateful for your time and wish you the best of luck out there. Look forward to having you back on here in the future.
Noah, thanks, sir. Take care.